In Afghanistan's Vardesh province, near the Pakistan border, midday heat pressed down as the air hung heavy with dust and the sharp sting of gunpowder. An American patrol walked straight into an ambush. Bullets ripped through the haze, sand burst into clouds, radios hissed with static. Men shouted. One voice cut through it all. "Man down! The CO's hit!" Through the chaos, a female combat medic dropped to her knees, her sleeves already dark with blood. She hauled the wounded commander behind a jagged boulder, wrapping his wounds as bullets cracked inches above her head. "We're surrounded!" someone screamed. Her eyes flared. She grabbed the fallen officer's M4 and growled, "Then we finish it here." The squad leader froze. "You're a medic!" he yelled. She chambered around. Not today. Her name was Corporal Piper, 27 years old, 5'7", with dark hair always tied tight against her neck. She had served 3 years as a combat medic with the 10th Mountain Division. Her duty was to preserve life, not end it. It was the vow she'd made to her mother the day she enlisted. "I won't fight, I'll heal." And for years she had lived by that promise, until the day the battlefield gave her no choice. Piper had grown up in a military home. Her father, Corporal Thomas, had been a Marine Corps medic killed in Iraq when she was 14. He was treating wounded men during a firefight when a mortar struck 10 feet away, gone in an instant. Her mother never truly recovered. She became withdrawn and fragile, leaving Piper to care for her through her teenage years. When she turned 18, she joined the Army, choosing the medic's path to honor the man who'd never come home. She wanted to save the lives he couldn't. Boot camp was brutal, the medical training even worse, but she endured. She mastered bleeding control, bone stabilization, emergency tracheotomies, and delivering medication while under fire. She trained herself to keep calm when everyone else lost control, to move fast and think faster. By graduation, she ranked among the best in her class, but when she reported to her unit, few noticed. The platoon just called her Doc Piper, the same nickname given to all medics, yet most saw her as background support, not a real soldier. They never really took her seriously. To them, she was backup support, not a soldier worth listening to. Some joked behind her back about her being a woman in uniform, while others openly doubted she had the strength to survive real combat. One sergeant even told her flat out that medics were nothing more than nurses who carried rifles they'd never dare to fire. Piper didn't argue, she just kept her head down and worked. She treated blisters, stomach cramps, twisted ankles, and dehydration. She passed out ibuprofen, wrapped bandages, and constantly reminded the squad to hydrate. None of it was glorious, but it kept them alive, and that was enough for her. Then came the day that tested everything she'd learned. Her first true firefight hit during a patrol near Kandahar. The convoy rolled over an IED, and 2 soldiers were torn up bad. Panic swept through the line. Too many were firing, too few helping. Piper didn't freeze. She sprinted straight into the kill zone, dragging the first man behind a vehicle, clamping his wound, then bolting back through gunfire for the second. For 20 relentless minutes she worked, bullets tearing the air around her, hands slick with blood. When it was over, both men were still breathing. The report later praised the rescue of 2 soldiers, but her name wasn't written anywhere in it, not once. That's when she understood that no matter how hard she fought to prove herself, she might always remain unseen. But one man had noticed. Captain Chris, the company commander, called her over after the dust settled. "You kept my men alive," he told her. "That's what matters." From that day, he became her strongest ally, ensuring she got every bit of training she deserved, trusting her when others wouldn't. And when the unit redeployed to Vardesh province, one of the most dangerous stretches in Afghanistan, he personally requested she join his team. Inside her pocket, Piper kept her father's dog tags, scratched, blackened, the metal dulled with years. The metal had long since lost its shine, darkened by years of wear. The engraving still read CPL Thomas, USMC, Opos. Every morning before patrol, Piper ran her fingers over those letters, a ritual that steadied her heartbeat and reminded her why she wore the uniform. Those tags weren't just a keepsake, they were her reason. They reminded her that healing could be its own kind of warfare, and she was about to learn that sometimes the two became one. That morning began like any other. The patrol was set to roll out at 600. Piper double-checked her med kit, restocked the morphine injectors, and packed extra field dressings. The mission seemed straightforward. Sweep through the Vardesh Valley, talk to locals, watch for insurgent movement. Just another routine patrol, except nothing in Afghanistan ever truly was. The convoy was made up of 4 Humvees and 20 soldiers. Chris rode up front. Piper took the rear seat in the last vehicle, rifle across her lap, med bag at her boots. The landscape pressed in from both sides. Jagged ridges, steep slopes, narrow dirt paths where even a small mistake could mean a drop to death. The heat was suffocating. Even with the windows down, it felt like they were sitting inside an oven. Through her sunglasses, she studied the ridgelines, every rock and shadow waiting for movement. Everything looked still. Too still. They were only 3 miles out from base when the IED blew. The lead Humvee vanished in a wall of fire. The blast hurled a shockwave that slammed into her truck, rocking it sideways. Ears ringing, vision blurred. The cabin filled with choking dust. For a few heartbeats, there was nothing. No sound, no thought. Then the gunfire came, ripping through the silence. AK-47 bursts shredded the air. RPG trails lit up the cliffs. They were pinned, ambushed from 3 sides. Piper didn't hesitate. Training took over. She snatched up her med bag and leapt from the Humvee. "Casualties, where are the casualties?" she yelled. A soldier pointed toward the inferno that had been the lead vehicle. She sprinted toward it, low and fast, dirt spitting up at her boots as bullets snapped around her. She didn't stop. 2 bodies lay near the wreckage. One man screaming with shrapnel embedded deep in his leg, another gasping through a punctured chest. Piper dragged both behind a cluster of boulders and dropped to her knees, hands already moving. She packed the chest wound tight with gauze, sealed it with a strip of plastic, and plunged a needle between the soldier's ribs to release the pressure. Then she spun to the second man, cinched a tourniquet high above the shredded leg, and pushed a morphine injector into his thigh. Within minutes, both were stable enough to survive, at least for now. But the gunfire was closing in, louder with every second. The radio cracked and screamed with overlapping voices. No command, no structure, pure chaos. That's when she spotted Chris. He was sprawled out 30 meters ahead, exposed, hands pressed to his stomach as blood soaked through his fatigues. He'd been hit. Piper didn't think. Her body just reacted. She burst from cover, sprinting across the open dirt as rounds tore the air around her, diving beside him. Gripping his vest, she dragged him backward inch by inch into a shallow ditch. He was heavy, dead weight, but she didn't let go. Her arms screamed, her breath came in gasps, yet she kept pulling until they were out of the open. She ripped his uniform open and froze for half a heartbeat. The bullet had torn through his lower abdomen, bleeding fast, dangerously fast. She shoved combat gauze into the wound, pressed down hard, and started an IV. Chris's face had gone ghostly pale, his breathing ragged. Through half-lidded eyes, he managed to whisper, "You shouldn't be here." She didn't look up. "I go where they fall," she said, steady, finishing the IV and pushing morphine into his arm. Her gaze swept the field. The platoon was scattered across the rocks, pinned from 3 directions. The enemy had the high ground and the numbers. If they didn't move soon, they'd be wiped out. Beside her, a young private clutched his rifle, shaking so badly he could barely keep his finger on the trigger. "We're outnumbered 10-1, he stammered. "We can't hold here." Piper looked down at Chris. His eyes closed now, his chest barely rising. Then she turned toward the ridgeline, where flashes of muzzle fire danced through the dust, and something inside her hardened. She slid her fingers down to the dog tags at her chest through the uniform, metal warm against her skin, the blood seeping through her sleeves and staining the fabric so the outline of the tags showed beneath. The promise to her mother echoed in her head, "I won't fight, I'll heal." Yet her father had stood up and taken a weapon when it mattered. He had done both, and now she would too. Whispering to herself as she watched the dark blood on her hands, she said, "He healed. I'll finish what he started." Chris lay unconscious with shallow, ragged breaths, blood pooling despite the pressure dressing. Piper checked for a pulse. There, faint but present. She'd done all she could medically. Now she just had to keep him alive until the medevac could pull them out. Beside her, a young private, maybe 20, clung to his rifle, terror written across his face, hands trembling. Around them, the platoon was scattered through the kill zone, every man isolated under heavy fire. The radio was a mess, voices tumbling over one another with no clear direction. There was no command. They were losing. Piper made up her mind. She reached to the wounded soldier lying next to her, grabbed his M4, and checked the mag, 20 rounds. She slammed the charging handle back and let it snap home. A round clicked into place. The private stared like she'd lost her mind. "What are you doing? You're a medic. You don't engage unless it's self-defense," he blurted. Her voice stayed calm, steady as iron. "This is self-defense," she said, "for all of us." She tapped her radio. "This is Piper. I need someone to cover Chris." "I'm moving to engage," she said into the radio. Static filled her ears for a few seconds before the platoon sergeant's voice broke through, sharp and furious. "Negative, Piper. Stay with the CO. That's an order." But she didn't listen. Dropping flat, she began to crawl forward, keeping low behind a ridge for cover, her movements quick and deliberate. The med bag still clung to her back, the rifle steady in her hands. Training took over. She hadn't fired an M4 since basic, but the muscle memory was still there. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12, taking her to the range every weekend. "Knowing how to shoot doesn't mean you want to use it," he used to say. "It means you're ready when you must." She reached a clear vantage point overlooking the ridge. Muzzle flashes flickered. 3, maybe 4 enemy fighters. She steadied her breath just as he'd taught her and squeezed the trigger. A short, precise burst. One flash vanished. She adjusted aim and fired again. Another target down. The gunfire from that side faltered. Then the radio cracked alive again. "Who the hell's firing from the west flank?" Piper keyed the mic. "This is Piper. Enemy suppressed on the ridge. Recommend flanking right." A pause, then disbelief. "Piper, you're a medic." Another burst echoed through the mountains. "Not right now, I'm not," she answered. Something shifted in the chaos. The others saw her, saw a medic, a woman, fighting back with accuracy and control, and it sparked something in them. The sergeant shouted, All units, flank right on Piper's position. Move! Move!" Soldiers began to advance, using her covering fire to push forward. Piper kept shooting, every round measured, her goal not to kill but to suppress, to give her people a chance to live. Then an RPG screamed toward her. She rolled hard left as the explosion blasted the ridge behind her, showering her with dirt and rock. Ears ringing, she pushed forward again, crawling to a new spot and opening fire once more. A soldier beside her yelled over the thunder of battle, voice cracking through the chaos. "Who the hell taught you to shoot like that?" A soldier shouted over the chaos. Piper didn't take her eyes off the ridge. "My dad," she answered flatly, finger already resetting on the trigger. The firefight dragged on for another 20 brutal minutes. Piper coordinated movements through the radio, calling out enemy positions, giving orders like she'd led squads all her life. When her rifle clicked empty, she dropped the mag, grabbed a full one from a wounded soldier beside her, and reloaded without hesitation. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing stayed calm. Fear never came, only focus. Then came a new sound, slicing through the thunder of gunfire. Rotor blades. A Black Hawk medevac crested the ridge, flanked by 2 Apache gunships. The Apaches unleashed hell. Chain guns tearing into the mountainside, scattering enemy fighters like dust in a storm. Just like that, the shooting stopped. Silence fell except for the fading echoes of metal and wind. Piper sprinted back to Chris, who still lay motionless. His pulse was faint but stronger now. The IV and morphine had done their job. She waved for the medevac team. 2 paramedics rushed over with a stretcher, lifting him carefully as she followed, her uniform drenched in blood and sweat, rifle still clenched in her grip. As they hoisted Chris into the helicopter, his eyes flickered open, dazed and searching. "What happened?" he rasped. Piper leaned close so he could hear her over the roar. "You got hit. I patched you up. You'll be fine." His gaze dropped to the rifle in her hands, realization dawning. "You fought," he said, not as a question, but as a truth. Piper gave a small nod. "Just did my job, sir." His hand found her wrist, weak but steady. "You saved me," he whispered. Her throat tightened. For 3 years she'd saved lives. Pulled men from burning vehicles, patched bullet wounds, performed surgery with trembling hands and no light. But this was different. This time, she hadn't just saved a life. She had fought for it. The Black Hawk lifted off, carrying Chris and the wounded into the sky as the dust settled around her boots. Piper stood motionless, watching the Black Hawk fade into the pale sky until the rotor noise vanished over the ridge. The platoon sergeant stepped up beside her, his face streaked with grime. His eyes flicked from the rifle in her hands to her expression. "Piper," he said quietly, "that was the craziest damn thing I've ever seen." She handed him the rifle, her arms heavy, voice flat. "It was the only thing I could do." He turned the weapon over, studying it, then looked back at her. "You realize you just led a counterattack, right?" She wiped the sweat and dust from her face, noticing her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was slipping away. "I just kept people alive," she said. "That's what I'm here for." The sergeant shook his head slowly. "No, Doc, what you did out there, that was something else." When the platoon finally returned to Bagram Airfield, medics patched up Piper for minor injuries. Scratches on her hands, bruised ribs, mild dehydration, nothing serious. Chris went straight into surgery. The doctors said he'd live. The round had missed every vital organ by inches. He was lucky, they all were. But the story didn't end there. Within hours, word tore through the base. A combat medic had picked up a rifle, and turned the tide of an ambush. A woman had led soldiers under fire. Some called her a hero. Others whispered she'd broken her medical oath. Command couldn't ignore it. An investigation opened. They wanted to know if Corporal Piper had gone too far, if her actions had crossed a line, if discipline was required. 2 days later, she sat in a cold conference room across from 3 officers, a colonel, a major, and a captain from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. "Explain what happened," they said. She told them everything. How Chris went down, how the platoon was losing control, how she'd made the call to fight because no one else could. She didn't apologize, didn't dramatize it, just laid out the facts. The JAG captain leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Corporal Piper," he said, "you're a combat medic. Your primary duty," the captain said firmly, "is to provide medical care, not to engage in offensive operations. Do you understand that?" Piper met his eyes without flinching. "Yes, sir, I do. But I also understand that my duty is to keep soldiers alive. And in that moment, the only way to do that was to fight." The room went silent. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions softening. Finally, the colonel spoke. "We've reviewed the radio logs. We've talked to everyone who was there. Every single soldier said the same thing. You saved their lives." The investigation ended right there. No charges, no reprimands, just quiet respect. When Piper returned to duty, everything felt different. The same soldiers who used to doubt her now greeted her by name instead of just Doc. They asked for her input during briefings. They listened when she spoke. Even the platoon sergeant, the one who'd barked at her over the radio during the firefight, found her later that week. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Didn't think you had it in you. I was wrong." Piper only nodded. She didn't need his apology. She already knew what she could do. 3 weeks later, Chris was cleared for light duty. He stepped into the medical tent slowly, a hand pressed against his side where the wound still mended. When he saw her, he smiled. "Heard you outranked me out there." Piper laughed. "Only until you woke up, sir." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small American flag, folded neatly into a triangle. "You carried this off the field," he said. "You should keep it." Piper shook her head. "No, sir, it's yours. I just made sure it didn't touch the ground." Chris studied her for a long moment, then spoke words she would never forget. "You know the difference between a good medic and a great one?" he asked. "A good medic saves the wounded. A great one makes sure there are fewer wounded to save." He pressed the flag into her hands. "Keep it. You earned it." Piper hesitated, then took it, her throat tight. "Thank you, sir," she managed. A month later, the battalion formed up under the harsh Afghan sun. The whole unit stood in formation on the dusty airfield beneath a pitiless sun. Piper was in the front row, sweat trickling under her dress uniform, standing rigid as the battalion commander stepped forward with a citation in hand. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an enemy of the United States," he read, "Corporal Piper distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous conduct while serving as a combat medic. Under heavy enemy fire, Corporal Piper rendered life-saving medical aid to her commanding officer and subsequently engaged enemy forces, enabling her unit to break contact and evacuate casualties. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself, her unit, and the United States Army." He fastened the Silver Star to her chest, the third highest award for valor. The soldiers erupted in applause, some even cheering. Piper held her posture, eyes fixed straight ahead, forcing herself not to cry. Her thoughts drifted to her father, to the promise she'd once made to her mother, that she wouldn't fight. but she had fought. And she knew she'd do it again if she had to, because sometimes healing and fighting were the same thing. After the ceremony, she returned to her tent, sat on her bunk, and opened her locker. Inside, a small wooden box waited. She opened it, placing the silver star beside her father's worn dog tags. Tracing the engraving, CPL Thomas, USMC, Opus, she whispered softly, "I understand now, Dad. I finally understand." 6 months later, her deployment ended. Back in the States, she was assigned to Fort Ashridge, where she became an instructor at the Army Medical Department School. She trained fresh recruits preparing for the front lines. On the first day of every class, she told them the same thing. "You'll be told your job is to heal, not to fight. That's true, but sometimes the best way to heal is to stop the bleeding at its source. You don't choose between saving and fighting, you choose both." Some of her students grasped it instantly, others took time. But by graduation, all of them understood. Being a medic wasn't about standing in the background. It was about doing whatever it took to keep your brothers and sisters alive. Piper taught them how to treat gunshot wounds, perform emergency amputations, and handle mass casualty crises under fire. But she also trained them to shoot straight, to move through chaos, and to lead when the chain of command collapsed. She didn't just teach medics, she taught soldiers. One afternoon, a reporter from a military magazine showed up for an interview. He asked the same question everyone always did. "Do you regret picking up that rifle?" Piper paused, thinking, then shook her head. "I regret that I had to," she said. "But I don't regret doing it. If I hadn't, more people would have died, and I couldn't have lived with that." The reporter scribbled notes, eyes narrowing. "Some people say you crossed a line." Piper smiled faintly. "I didn't cross a line," she said. "I erased it." A month later, the article came out under the headline, "The Medic Who Fought Back." It spread fast through military circles. Messages began pouring in from other medics, men and women who'd been forced to make the same impossible decisions. They thanked her for proving that being a healer and being a warrior didn't have to be opposites. Piper read every message, keeping them neatly filed in a folder on her desk as a reminder she wasn't alone. Years later, after leaving the Army, she became a paramedic in her hometown. The missions were different, but the code was the same. Move fast, stay calm, save lives. She excelled at it. One night she got a call about a shooting at a convenience store. 2 victims down, shooter still inside. The police hadn't secured the scene yet, and her partner told her to wait. But she didn't. Grabbing her med bag, she ran straight in. Amid shattered glass and chaos, she worked fast, stabilizing both victims as the cops cleared the building. Both lived. Later, her supervisor demanded, "Why did you go in before it was safe?" Piper just shrugged. "Because people were dying," she said, "and I could help." He shook his head with a weary grin. "You're going to get yourself killed one of these days." Piper smiled back. "Maybe," she said, "but not today." Thousands of miles away, back at the old base in Vardesh province, the soldiers who'd survived that ambush built a small memorial. Nothing grand, just a plaque fixed to a stone. Its inscription read, "She healed with her hands. She fought with her heart." In memory of the day Corporal Piper reminded us what it means to be a soldier. Every year, new troops rotated through that valley, and every year they passed that plaque. Some stopped and read the words, others just glanced at it and kept walking. But all of them knew the story, and all of them carried it with them. Piper still keeps her father's dog tags, hanging from the rearview mirror of her car. Every time she looks at them, she remembers the promise she made, and how she kept it. Not by refusing to fight, but by fighting for the right reasons. If you can't save the world, she often whispers to herself, "Save one life at a time." If you believe quiet heroes deserve to be remembered, subscribe to Major Tom's Tales, where real people's courage lives on, far beyond the noise of the world.